You know, we have one more really remarkable speaker, and we've made several references to the species that are unique and wonderful and extraordinary in the San Lorenzo Valley and related to the river and the creeks. But right now they aren't endangered and they aren't threatened, so they don't get paid the attention they need to have. And so Chad Mitcham is here. He's with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, the North Coast Division, which is actually out of Ventura, but he's been here in Santa Cruz representing them for 15 years, give or take? Okay, so he is a senior fish and wildlife biologist, and he does understand these other species. So he's going to talk about minimizing habitat benefits, maximizing, sorry. I need new bifocals. Maximizing habitat benefits for the western pond turtle and other sensitive species. So this is really special, Chad. Thank you for being here. I'd like to hear about this.
Can I move
Use the arrow.
Yeah, I got it.
And
Thanks. Oh.
Thanks.
Thanks for sticking around, everybody. So I was initially asked by Chris Berry to speak today about the western pond turtle, as the species is likely to be federally listed as threatened in the near future. And the western pond turtle is known to occur in the San Lorenzo River. So the first half of this presentation will focus on the pond turtle to include topic aspects such as its potential listing, life history, and my thoughts in regards to habitat management of the river. However, being that opportunities to speak to a wider audience don't come along very often for me, I did feel like it was important to talk about other topics that the Fish and Wildlife Service believes is important. And this is primarily in regards to the lower river, and the lower river, in this case, would be Highway 1 to the river mouth. And for the second half of the presentation, I'll do that.
Do you mind holding the mic? It'll record. Thanks, Jeff.
Sure. So as many of you know, the Fish and Wildlife Service is charged with administering the Federal Endangered Species Act, which means that we're primarily involved with projects or issues that have effects, whether positive or negative, on federally listed species. And service involvement in the San Lorenzo River has been historically somewhat limited due to the fact that there's really been only one species that we have jurisdiction over that is in the river, and that would be the tidewater goby. The tidewater goby, which I'll talk about in the second half of the presentation, is primarily associated with lagoon management projects such as the Culvert project that I figured someone would talk about earlier today, but they really haven't. I think everybody pretty much knows what the Culvert project is. It's essentially a project that's going to help regulate lagoon water levels, so we won't have to breach the lagoon. But tidewater goby is also associated with the Brents Forty Creek flood channel. They are known to occur in that channel. So the service noticed a proposed rule to list the western pond turtle as federally threatened October of last year. And we proposed the list of species because of major populations declines due to primarily habitat alteration, the introduction of invasive plants and animals, and disease. So the species may be officially listed as federally threatened as early as fall or winter of this year. So if listed, any take of the species would require authorization by the service. And just so we're all on the same page here. Fish and Wildlife Service defines take as to harass, harm, pursue, hunt, shoot, kill, capture, or collect, or attempt to do any of those things. And we also define the word harm as to include significant habitat modification where it actually kills or injures wildlife by impairing essential behavior patterns such as feeding, breeding, or sheltering. So for instance, if nesting habitat of the species would be altered in such a way that they couldn't use it for nesting, then that could be considered take. A little bit about the species needs. So the western pond turtle requires both aquatic and terrestrial habitats to fulfill its life cycle. Hatchlings, juveniles, adults all aquatic habitat for breeding, feeding, overwintering, and shelter. And aquatic habitat in this case is obviously the river. They occur in ponds and lakes and creeks and that sort of thing. And all life stages, so that's eggs, hatchlings, juveniles, and adults, utilize terrestrial habitat for nesting, overwintering, and dispersal. So the terrestrial habitat would be these areas adjacent to the aquatic habitats. Actually, the photo in the top right is of a hatchling. It's in some of these hands, so you can see they're very small, very vulnerable to predation or impacts from human beings. And the bottom right is a photo of an adult, so they're actually a pretty small animal. So a little bit about the breeding life history. So a gravid female, a pregnant female, will move from aquatic to upland habitat to nest in spring or early summer. And they nest in sunny, sparsely vegetated open areas with little to no tree canopy. Female will excavate a nest on her own, so she'll lay up to 13 eggs, which will hatch in about 3 months. After those hatchlings emerge, they'll go back into the aquatic habitat. And interestingly, these turtles don't reach sexual maturity until between 7 to 12 years old. So as you can imagine, that's a long time to have to wait to be able to reproduce. And they're long-lived. They can live up to 55 years. And to my knowledge, there hasn't been an effort geared towards understanding western pond turtle numbers in the San Lorenzo. Although we don't have those numbers, it's presumed to be pretty small, and this is just based on just anecdotal observations that I talk with people about. Additionally, based on my knowledge of the river, quality nesting habitat is limited, and like I said, it's these grassland, sunny, sparsely vegetated open areas, these grassland habitats. It's fairly limited due to factors such as the presence of non-native vegetation like ice plant, homeless encampments, and the constant threat of habitat disturbance resulting from vegetation management, which I'll talk about on the next slide. But ultimately, due to the presumed low numbers of these animals in the lower San Lorenzo, the time period it takes to get them to reach sexual maturity, and the highly altered and constrained habitat in the lower San Lorenzo means that every individual is extremely important to make sure that it continues to persist in this area. Okay, when talking about habitat for the pond turtle, I must also talk about flood management activities for one primary reason. These activities are most likely the primary means by which habitat for the pond turtle within the lower river system is either going to be positively or negatively impacted. So the goal of flood management activities, self-descriptive, however, it is to ensure that the San Lorenzo levee system meets Army Corps of Engineers standards for structural integrity and hydrologic flow. And specifically, these management activities I'm referring to entail vegetation management, so that's the removal of large trees and riparian habitat, that sort of thing. Grading and tilling of the riverbanks, and small mammal burrow management. And all this is done, like I said, for the purpose of lowering the risk of levee breach or levee overtopping during large rain events. And as someone who lives immediately adjacent to the river, down on River Street, I very much appreciate the importance of ensuring a structurally viable levee system. This is a photo that I took just a couple years ago right by my house, so I know it's important to maintain. However, federal listing of the western pond turtle would necessitate the city of Santa Cruz, who's charged with managing the levee system, to balance flood management activities with turtle conservation. And the primary need for this is to ensure that those activities, those flood management activities, don't result in take of the species. For instance, the city sometimes manipulates the riverbank areas with heavy equipment, and we want to make sure that they're digging up nests or altering nesting habitats such that the animal can't use it to actually nest in. And ultimately, if activities are determined to result in take, then the city must acquire take authorization permit from the service. And I think that we view this circumstance when I'm talking about the potential federal listing as an opportunity to collaborate with the city, not only for the benefit of the western pond turtle, but for other walleye species that utilize the river. So this collaboration with the city, we want to just accomplish a couple things. First of all, we want to minimize effects to the western pond turtle. We want to hopefully enhance habitat for the western pond turtle, and then ultimately determine if take can be avoided. And I think fortunately, because the western pond turtle requires sunny, sparsely vegetated areas to nest, this actually aligns with levee management in that they typically need to actually remove vegetation, not add vegetation to the system. So really it just comes down to understanding where and how to manage potential nesting areas. So first thing we need to do is determine what areas in the lower San Lorenzo River actually provide potential or current nesting habitat for the species. You take that information, you fold that into a flood management program in terms of the vegetation management activities in particular, but also with grading and tilling. And then ultimately, at the end of the day, we hope that that existing and potential nesting areas will be essentially kept in that state so animals can actually use it to nest in. Okay, due to the species potential listing, the service is looking forward to other opportunities to collaborate as well. This photo is from a 2016 effort by the Coastal Watershed Council where they removed ice plant from the riverbanks of the San Lorenzo. And although this project probably wasn't geared towards actually western pond turtle habitat enhancement, this is exactly the sort of work that directly improves habitat for the species. And like I said before, we believe that listing the turtle is a prime opportunity to partner with groups like Coastal Watershed Council and the RCD and others to improve conditions for western pond turtle and other wildlife in the lower San Lorenzo. Now for pond turtle, we'll switch to tidewater goby now. So the tidewater goby is a federally endangered fish species about yay big. They're primarily associated with brackish waters, but they can occur in freshwater, they can occur in the ocean. So theoretically, they can be found throughout the lower river as I've described it here, so that's going to the river mouth. Unfortunately, because there is little to no aquatic or emergent vegetation in the river and the system is highly channelized, the tidewater goby have relatively few areas to actually take cover and find cover from predators. Additionally, due to the need to breach the lagoon, due to the need to lower risk of flooding, the city has historically been relegated to breach the mouth of the lagoon, thereby exposing tidewater goby to be flushed out of the system and into the ocean prematurely. And it's my understanding that the city and their partners have previously carried out efforts to enhance habitat, such as planning to plant trees and introduction of large wood and that sort of thing. Introduction of large wood in the river system actually allows fish to take cover and find refuge from other predators. But I very much understand the difficulty in implementing these sorts of projects because of the need to meet flood flow standards. But we are looking forward to continue to explore these opportunities with the city. Gratefully, however, the city has been very proactive on addressing the topic of breaching the San Lorenzo River mouth. I wanted to take this slide to give major props to the city for their forward-thinking and motivation to get the culvert project implemented. This is an image from the plans for the culvert project. I know there's a bit more work to do, but in our opinion, this novel project will serve as a model for other communities up and down the coast to replicate. In terms of benefits to the tidewater goby, the culvert system will help the species by greatly reducing the number of breaching events that happen every year, subsequently reducing the consistent threat of premature flushing of these animals into the ocean. However, this will not change the fact that the river will remain highly channelized and aquatic vegetation will remain mostly absent essentially forever. In this photo from 1931, we can see that even this long ago, the river was already highly degraded and channelized. Although you can see this area here still existed back then. Quasi kind of estuarine area. This area wasn't lost until, the 1950s or 60s. When it was filled to make a parking lot, of all things, which of course exists today. This sort of feature, especially in this highly degraded river system and channelized system, no doubt provided essential habitat for several wildlife species. And although I am a realist, I do know that amazing things can happen when highly motivated people come together. When one considers the conditions and constraints of the lower river, it's clear that this is the only significant area that could potentially be reclaimed for the river. Certainly implementing this sort of reclamation project, that is the removal of the parking lot and the rebuilding of the levee in this segment, would require an enormous amount of collaboration and funding. But I do believe that it is something that should be considered if we are serious about preserving and enhancing the lower San Lorenzo for future generations. The benefits of restoring an area that could reintroduce larger scale estuarine characteristics would have immense benefits on many wildlife species, including tidewater goby and the other federally listed fish species that utilize this system. I did not know how that was going to go over. But let's talk about something that is definitely easier to implement. Talk about raptors in the San Lorenzo. So you can see from this picture that raptors want to and do use the lower San Lorenzo to forage for prey. So here's a hawk sitting up here on this newly installed post. Unfortunately, due to the mass removal of large trees, they have a hard time doing this, as there are limited resources which allow them to perch, hunt, and nest for that matter. This picture shows that these birds will use resources provided to them, but we can do much better. As I mentioned earlier, the city is charged with ensuring the integrity of the levee system, and this is primarily done through the management of small mammal burrows and the removal of vegetation. In terms of burrow management, this is a costly task, and there are also questionable ethical considerations. I'll spare you from the details, but ultimately the vast majority of small mammals, squirrels in particular, are eradicated, and then their burrows are filled with grout to plug up the levee. And that last year, these costs, based on an article in the Santa Cruz Sentinel, was in the range of $250,000 to $500,000. However, there is an approach that can be combined with these traditional methods that's much more appealing. In 2016 and 2017, a project was implemented by the Ventura County Public Works Agency, which involved the installation of raptor perches, raptor nest platforms, and owl boxes, which aimed to determine the effectiveness of utilizing raptors versus traditional methods of rodent control. This study showed that rodent burrows were reduced by around half in the study area, and this is only after a couple-year period, which was anticipated to result in cutting costs of levee management in half. So I guess ultimately my question is, why are we not approaching burrow management in a way that will not only substantially cut costs, but also help our local wildlife? My hope is that through compulsory collaboration between the service and city regarding the Western Pond Turtle, we can also discuss developing a levee management plan that incorporates these raptor-friendly solutions that I mentioned above. And to wrap this up, the Western Pond Turtle is likely to be federally listed in the near future, this year, most likely. The service is looking forward to use this as a reason to get more involved with issues in the lower San Lorenzo River. This involves communication and partner building not only with the city but also other community organizations. Although progress has been made on some fronts, the San Lorenzo needs a lot of help, and we must increase efforts to improve conditions for wildlife. I think we're fairly limited in terms of what can actually be accomplished in the lower San Lorenzo. It's precisely because of this we need to keep an open mind in order to explore all potential opportunities. That's it.
Wow. Thank you. Significant, isn't it? Chris, you're first. Your hand is up fast. Speak as loudly as you can.
I'm curious, really good stuff about the lower river. I look forward to working with you on that. I'm curious what you think about the impacts of the Western Pond Turtle listing will be up in the valley. Highland Park, Rock Loam, there's lots of areas where there's pond turtles. Also, I'm curious why the public comment was reopened on the listing proposal the other day.
I try to stay out, second part of the question about the public comment, I try to stay out of that kind of thing. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen, so I still would anticipate it's going to be listed, but it may not. In terms of your first question about Western Pond Turtle in the Upper Valley, I don't know. I know that there's a learning curve associated with each time an animal is listed. We have to become experts on that species. And foot-hill yellow-legged frog was just listed recently, which I'm still trying to get up to speed on. And now western pond turtle, it's not listed yet, so I haven't really taken a deep dive into understanding all the nuances and details about the species. But it's going to be a big deal. It's going to be a huge deal because red-legged frogs is kind of our most kind of widespread species that a lot of different folks have to deal with. But western pond turtle, in areas, and they co-occur in a lot of situations, but in areas where perhaps like the upper valley, there's not a ton of frog occurrences. There could be a bunch of western pond turtle occurrences, which it's just, we need to hire more biologists. I don't know. It's gonna, people are gonna like us less, you know what can I say?
Well, these people will like you.
Some people will like us more, most people will like us less.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, on the western pond again, because in the upper reaches of the valleys, it's present, nowhere near like it was 50 years ago,
Right.
but it's definitely present. I don't know that we have a biological count. I think we have some efforts going on with the city, at least of Buffalo, with some work in the area. As you evaluate, how can we help bring that to your wheelhouse? Because right now, all I'm hearing is lower river, and it kind of concerns me.
Yeah, I mean, just individuals, for instance, individuals can help. Chris was out last week doing something on the weekend, came across a western pond turtle that was looking for a nest site. He said, hey, here's a location that was actually in our Sacramento office, but I forwarded that information to our Sacramento office, and they're like, oh, this is great, we need this updated information. So I think there's always things like that that can help. If you see a western pond turtle, take a photo of it so we can actually know it's a western pond turtle. And a location, that's really helpful.
Gotcha.
Understanding how to improve habitat for the species, for instance, next to these water bodies where the western pond turtle could occur, actually keeping these potential nesting habitats in suitable condition for them to actually be able to use them to nest in is helpful. Not introducing invasive plants and animals to these sites on private properties. I mean, ultimately, the responsibility is on the landowners and the folks that are actually impacting habitats and that sort of thing to get an understanding of whether the animal's there or not. But for the private landowner that just wants to help, just learn about the species, just take a deep dive like I am, learn about the species and figure out how to, what you could do in an area that you're specifically referring to or talking about.
Should we participate in the current reopening of the discussion?
The comment period?
As organizations to support the concept?
Of course, yeah.
Okay.
Typically people just complain or they don't have a lot of positive things to say about it. So yeah, I mean, you'd have to get on the Federal Register, search for the western pond turtle listing, proposed rule, and then yeah, of course, people. I mean, that's what it's for. The Federal Register is for public comment.
I
So.
think we can do that. At least the Baldwin still can. CWC, you guys all out there, you'll do too? Okay. Any more questions for Chad?
Yeah, I work with the Coastal Waters Council. I'm the river ecologist, so I get to do habitat enhancement. I'd love to pick a break after, but if I don't get to, what is the most helpful thing to do on the lower San Lorenzo River to make better habitat? I'm hearing saying make spaces that are open and remove invasives. Are there any other things that are helpful?
Well, I mean, everything is so scrutinized when it comes to the river channel because of the flood flow stuff. I think the best thing, I am on the river walk numerous times a week. I think the easiest thing to jump on would be ice plant removal just because it's so widespread and it's relatively easy to actually control. So I would suggest that would be a great first way to start because those ice plant kind of occurs on those kind of flat slopes right adjacent to they should be they already sparsely vegetated. They could be grasslands. So I would suggest that would be a great place to start.
Sir?
Yeah, part of this International Garden Center in Santa Cruz, we've been particularly concerned about those lands that we showed. You had two examples of those. They were put in the biology community. But I mean, pretty concerned about that and done studies
Not that I know of. I mean, I would imagine the city had, tried to reduce the spray or whatever you call it of the.
Well, they tried shielding, but they actually had left them full strength. They were bought with dimmer capability, and they seemed to refuse to want to dim them over security concerns.
Right. I think it would really kind of come down to, in my view, like, I don't know the effective lights on these turtles. I think ultimately they would like to be in the water, I would guess, most of the time, if it's actually suitable for them. It would seem where those lampposts are situated, perhaps the light isn't necessarily getting down into those riverbank and areas where there might be nesting habitat. But to answer your question, I don't know of any studies or anything like that's been done, and yeah, sorry.
Okay. Sir?
How saline tolerant are the pond turtles? How far down in the lagoon can they go?
That's a great question that I do not know the answer to.
Okay. Have to check that one out. Don?
Yeah, I've been working these watersheds for about 30 years, and I definitely see less pond turtles than I used to. But the ones that I have seen, not in the lagoon, but elsewhere, they're always associated with in-stream wood that's in the water, but also above the water where the animals can bask in the sun, especially in pools.
Yeah.
Sunny pool areas. So maintaining that in-stream wood is critical.
Yeah, I think it's another reason, another species to add on to the trout, the salmon, and the tiger and goby. Now we have turtles that all want that large wood. So I think it's just another reason to push those efforts. But then again, that's where you will see them, right? They're out of the water. I think they also will kind of burrow in mud underwater and burrow in uplands and hide in a lot of leaf litter, that kind of thing. So that's just the easiest place for people to see them because they're,
Yeah, there's only one place in SoCal again where I see them, and it's where there happens to be wood that's in the water, but also gives them a sunny area, and then there's a kind of flat area over by a cabin where they can nest. That's the only place I see them in SoCal.
I'll probably be in contact.
Yeah, the kitchen cabin area.
Okay, yes, let him know where that is. Lisa?
So my question actually is related to the land issue. If you want to use nighttime raptors for mammal control, then surely those lamps would be a problem.
Can you say that again?
Okay. So if you've got these lamps on all the time throughout the night, if you wanted to use nighttime raptors as the mammal control, wouldn't that be an issue?
Yeah, well, I think that would be owls probably. And I mean, I will admittedly, I'm not an expert in this field either. But obviously the raptor perches and nest platforms, they are used during the day. For the owl box, you'd have to strategically place them. I mean, there's areas in the river, a lot of different choices in the river. I think these owl boxes could potentially go as well. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that's going to have to kind of get worked out. Okay.
Yes, last one.
What do hatchlings eat before they get to the water?
Probably anything they can fit in their mouth. I don't know. That's like most animals. Anything they can get in there.
Yeah, whatever they can. That was all for Tate.
Thank you.
Learned so much. Thank you very much.